Hey everyone, so in this tutorial we are back into Figma and today we'll be creating this calendar filter. We'll be creating all the components and then we'll be making a short prototype. And this is actually from a real app from Yandex.Mail. So here it is. I saw this the other day and I thought this was super new, super fun to use, and I also thought, oh, it would be a great challenge to try to recreate this. With that said, let's create a new Figma file and get started. I did some prep work here, so I have my colors and I made a couple of textiles. Another thing I'm going to do is go inside the Joey Banks iOS UI kit for Figma and grab the status bar. Honestly, I'm just so grateful that I don't have to make this one from scratch. We are going to begin by designing this part here, this card header. The first thing I'm going to do is create a text layer, and this one will be date. And I am going to apply our textiles to it. So this one is base and semi-bold. And I'll wrap this in auto layout, and then we can duplicate. And the second one is going to be a clear filter. And for this one, we're going to make it regular. And the color is going to be blue for this one. And this one will be black. Then we're going to make another copy here. And we'll want to have an icon for closing the card, so kind of like a times or an X icon. So this one I'm actually going to grab from the SF symbols, but you can use any icon kit. And I'll just place it inside here. Now we can combine all of this in one auto layout, and we'll give it a fill of white. And we also wanted to have a fixed width of 390. We don't want any spacing in between. And then we'll just set this to fill the container. So they're about the same size. And this one is going to be centered. This one is going to be aligned to the right. And this one's going to be aligned to the left. And maybe we'll set that padding to 16. And this one will do 12. Then for the overall frame, we will add the top padding of 16. And we also want to have a border radius at the top of 10. And we'll do the corner smoothing to match the iOS. Now we can rename this to card header, and we can turn this into a component. Actually, first thing I'm going to set this background color to be like lighter gray. And now I'm going to create a frame for, let's do iPhone 14. And first I'm going to place the status bar. And now we're going to grab an instance of the card header and place it inside. And one more thing that we need to do here is to add a dimmer. So for now, let's just make just a rectangle, and it will be 390 wide. And for now, we can make it the full width. And it will be black. And we'll set this to 40%. And let's turn this into a component as well and call it dimmer. And we'll place it inside. And our card header will want to be at the top. And we can move it a little bit higher up. And then the last thing for our card header, we also want to add the bottom border. So we'll do bottom, and then will just be 1 pixel, and we'll set it to gray 15. The next part we want to do this week here. So I'm going to create another text layer, and this one, let's just start with Sunday, and we're going to update the text to regular small. And again, to Shift+A to add the auto layout wrapper. And then we'll set the width to fixed to 52. And we'll make it centered. And now I'm going to duplicate this. So let's set this to 0 and do the rest of our days. And we also need Friday and Saturday. And then we'll change the color to black. But for our weekends, we will modify it to red. We'll also set the fill to white on the overall frame, and then we'll select just the dates, and for each we'll add a bottom border of, again, the light gray. And then for our frame, we'll set the horizontal padding to 12, and then we'll add a top padding of 4. Now we can rename this, let's say, week, and turn it into a component, and we're going to make a copy and place it inside our overall frame. Actually, we're going to update the padding to 13, so it brings us to 390. The next thing that we're going to do is create a component for just this one single day here. And while it looks like a small component, it will probably be the most complicated part of the tutorial. So we'll definitely need to keep a lot of use cases in mind. So one, we can just have a regular unselected date. We can also have an unselected date that's weekend. We can have one that's a start of the range, one that's a middle of the range, one that's the end of the range, one that's just selected on its own. And lastly, we also need to consider the future or inactive dates. So we need something for an active weekday and an active weekend. But like always, we're just going to take it one step at a time. And I'll begin by creating a text layer. And we'll just do D as the placeholder. And let's wrap it inside auto layout. And for this one, we'll have it a fixed width and fixed height. So for our height is going to be 40 and our width is going to be 52. And we'll center this. Let's give it a fill of white. And then this first one is just going to be our regular unselected weekday, and we'll change the color to black. Then we'll make a copy and we'll update this one to red. It's going to be our active weekend day. Then we're going to make another copy. This one is going to be our inactive weekday, and this one is going to be our inactive weekend day. Now let's make another copy of this one. And so this one's going to be our special one. This one is going to have all the properties to be displayed either as selected or middle of the range or start or end of the range. So first thing I'm going to do is make this rectangle here. And it's going to have a height of 50 and a width of 52. So, and we will make it just a yellow. And then we're going to make a copy. And this one will give the width of 32. And then we're going to create an ellipse. And this one is going to be 32 by 32, 40. And we're going to just make a half and update the start to be like this. We'll also change the color to yellow. And then we'll make a union of these two shapes here. So let's rename. This is going to be our middle. This is going to be our start. And this one is going to be our end. And this one will just rotate. The last thing, we're going to create another ellipse. And it will be 40. This one is just going to be our singular selected. So let's rename this to singular. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to take all of these shapes and I'm going to place this just inside this one frame here. So let's take this and we'll place it inside. And we want to set the position to absolute. And it's just going to be in the middle. And we'll send it to the back. Then we're going to do the same thing with the remaining shapes. Again, set them to position absolute and send it to the back. And same with the end one. And lastly, our selected one. Now I'm going to bring this here. And we're going to rename this to day. And from here, we'll create the component set. Let's add auto layout to the set so it's easier to move things around. And then the first thing I'm going to do is to set up a couple variant properties. So our first one is going to be selected. And for these ones, the value is no, and this one is yes. Then we're going to create another variant that's going to say weekend. And for this, the answer is going to be yes. And for these ones, the answer is going to be no. And another variant we're going to have inactive. And this one is going to be no. This one is going to be yes. Now we're going to set up a couple Boolean component properties just for this variant here. So first, let's just arrange our layers so that they make somewhat more sense. And now the first thing I'm going to do is let's start with this start layer. And what I'm going to do is go to the layer panel here. And we'll just call it start. And we'll set the default value to false. Obviously, it's hard to tell just looking at this here, but if you look inside your layers, by default, the start is now hidden. So now Let's do the same thing with the middle part. We're going to go to Layer, create property called Middle, and set the value to, actually no, this one will keep as true. So as you can see, it's still shown, it's not hidden. And then we'll do the same thing with the end. We'll also set it to false. And we'll do the same thing with the singular. We'll set it to false. So as you can see, all of them are hidden by default except the middle one. And the reason I kept the middle one shown by default is because it's probably going to be the most popular option for the selected one. So it's nice to have it shown as such by default. And now let's take an instance of our day component. And as you can see, when it's not a selected variant, we don't have any of these settings for like the start, middle, or range. But the moment we do change it to selected, we do have all of these options here. There is one negative with this setup. As you can see, when we have the selected turned on, we get all of our options. And ideally, we want to be able to just choose one of these options, but we are able to toggle multiple at the same time. Personally, I don't think it's a big problem, but it could be confusing to somebody using the component. Still, personally, I prefer a setup like this, where we're able to break down the capabilities of component into separate compartments, as opposed to have one property and more variants to manage. But I would love to know what you think and how you would approach this setup. Now we can move on and create the component for our month, this part here. First I'm going to do is create a text layer, and we'll call this month and just do this for the year. And we'll update this to the base font size, and we'll update the color. And from here, I'm going to take our day here, and we'll want to make like 7 copies. Let's put them into auto layout and change the direction. And then our ends are always going to be weekends. And I think we can have a max of 6 weeks spanning over the course of 1 month. So we'll do 6 by default. And let's place the month inside here. Actually, we'll update the spacing to 8. And then for our horizontal padding, we'll do 13. And for our vertical, we'll do 16. And we can also set the fill to white. From here, we'll rename this to month, and we'll turn it into a component. Now let's grab an instance of this. For our months, obviously we can have something that does not start with a Sunday here and starts somewhere in the middle of the week instead. But currently, if we were to delete a couple of the first days here, we can see everything shifts over to the left. And we don't want that to happen. So what I'm going to do is for this first week here, I'm going to set it to fill the container, and then I'll align it to the right. And now it behaves as expected. Now we can start adding some real data to our month here. And for this example, we'll just have 3 months. We'll do September, October, and November. There are a couple ways to do this. The first thing is just manually going one by one through each day and replacing it with a number, which does require some time. There is another way. We can use the Google Sheets Sync plugin to help us populate the data faster. The only problem with that method is that the plugin would not work when we have an instance of the component. Not exactly sure why that happens, so we would have to detach the component to do that. Before we get into that, we can just make 3 copies and name our months here, and just make sure that we have the start and the end placed correctly. So this one will be here, and we don't need the second row, and we don't need this one here. Then we'll grab another instance. This one will be October. And we don't need these ones. And then our last one is going to be November. We don't need this. We don't need this one. What I'm going to do now is actually create a new spreadsheet, Google spreadsheet here. All I'm going to do is do the day column here. And in the second one, I'll start the count with 1. And then for our next row, we're going to write a very simple formula that just increments the second row by 1. So this one is 2. And now we can just drag this all the way down and just going to keep on incrementing. So we have all the way up to 31. Now we're going to return to our file here, and we'll need to make a small adjustment to the day component. So I'm going to select all of our matching layers, and I'm going to rename them to start with pound, and then I'll write day, which matches the name of our column in the spreadsheet. And the reason I'm adding pound is because it will help the plugin to find the text layer that I want to update. So I'll rename. And now first thing, I will have to detach all of this month instances. And now we're going to return to our spreadsheet. And we just need to make sure that anyone with a link can view the file. So we'll copy the link. And now the first thing, I'm actually going to hide or delete all of the hidden days here. And now I'm going to select the month, go to the plugin section here. And so I have the Google Sheets plugin in my recents here. But again, if you just search for it, it's just going to pop up. And I'll run the plugin. And now I'll just have to paste the link and do the fetch. And here we go. Now I have all my numbers here. And now let's repeat the same thing for October and November. So first, I just want to make sure I don't have any actual hidden layers in here because the plugin will then assign the numbers to those hidden layers. And I'll select this, run the plugin. And we have our numbers for October. And now we just need to do the same thing for November. So I'll select and run the plugin. And here's our November. So now we can combine our list of months into auto layout. And just, we don't need any spacing. And we can actually bring this inside our frame. Let's move this a little bit down so we have more room. And now let's just play the prototype button and see what we currently have. And as you can see, I can scroll, but the status bar and the card header also scroll. And we just want the list of months to scroll. So we'll need to do some configuration for that. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to the prototype here and set it to vertical scrolling. And then what we want to do is our status bar, we want to set it to fixed. And then the same thing for our card header and for our week. And then we don't want our dimmer to scroll either. But as you can see, when I set it to fixed, it comes over top of the month list. And one way we could fix this is just make it smaller. So I'm going to just drag it until it lines up with the edge of the week here. Now, when we return to our prototype, you can see that the list is scrolling, but we can see it popping right over here. And again, that shouldn't happen. So what we're going to do is for our status bar, we'll also drag it a little bit down and we'll set the fill to white. And now we just want to make sure that the week and the card header are at the top. And then the dimmer is above the status bar. And now when we return back to the prototype, you can see that it's scrolling as expected. So just a few little things that I could do here is maybe add a little spacing up at the top and the bottom of the list. So now when we scroll, we get more space here at the bottom. The last component that we need to make is our button here, and then we can put this all together into a very small and simple prototype. What I'm going to do is, again, create a text layer, and we'll make the size bigger and change the color to black. Then we'll wrap it inside the auto layout frame, and we'll set the vertical padding to 12. And we'll also make sure that it's centered. And I think we'll keep the width at around 364. We'll also do the fill of this brighter yellow here, and we'll set the border radius to 50. So now we can rename this to a button, turn this into a component, grab an instance, and we're just going to place it right inside here. And we will want to adjust it, and maybe we want it like 48 pixels from the bottom. Now, when we return to our prototype, we can see that we have the button here at the bottom, and it stays fixed when we scroll the calendar. Last thing before we do our prototype, we want to set some dates as inactive. So for instance, let's say today is November 9th, which means that all of these dates are not yet eligible to be filtered. So what we're going to do is just select all of the remaining ones and set them as inactive. Now I'm going to bring this back to clip content, and we can do our prototype. So first thing I'm going to do is make a copy. And here we just want to make the clear filter button inactive because we don't have a filter selected yet. In the actual app, though, they did keep the save button even when nothing is selected. I'm not sure if it was done intentionally or not. I could definitely see the case for keeping the save button as kind of a signal to where you should expect to find the save once you have selected your filter. So maybe that's why they did it. But anyway, so we will start selecting our range from September 14th. So we'll add an interaction from here. And we also want to make it not instant, but rather dissolve, so it's softer. And then in our second frame, we just want to make sure that it's set as selected. And instead of middle, it will be singular. And then we're going to make another copy of this frame. And let's say, so our end range will want to be October 14th. So we'll add another interaction from the October 14th to our final frame. And so what we need to do here is we need to make sure that everything between September and October 14th shows as selected. So this one is going to be selected. So what we're going to do is just select all of these ones here. And they'll be shown as selected. And instead of middle, they'll be shown as end. Actually, we need to make sure that all of them are toggled as selected. Then this one is going to be just a singular one. And I will select all of these ends here. And they'll also be selected. And they'll be set to start. And last, I will select all of the middle ones here. And we'll switch them to selected, and they are set to middle by default. So now we can return to our prototype. First, I'm going to click on the September 14th. Then let's say we scroll and click on the October 14th. And we have our range, but something happened. Even though we were scrolled a little bit down when we selected October 14th, the scroll reset itself the moment we clicked on October 14th. And there is a way to fix this. So what I'm going to do is return to our prototype links, and I'll just make sure that I set the scroll to preserve. And now when we try this again, we can even scroll down a little bit here, do September 14th, then maybe scroll a little bit more, do October 14th, and we don't have any sudden scroll resets here. I guess one more thing that we can do just to make this prototype look nicer is return to our Figma file, go to the prototype tab here, and just set the background to maybe grayish. This way it looks better. And another thing you can do is display it on an actual device. So we'll do iPhone 14. Definitely looks much nicer. That's about it for this tutorial. We definitely did a lot. There are a couple more cleanup things that you can still do. So when you're not on the prototype tab, you can't see the links. And it could actually be useful to have some kind of connectors here just to show to somebody who is jumping into this file that this, in fact, is a prototype, that these frames are, in fact, connected. So there is a plugin called Autoflow, and the way it works, so first we're just going to select it, run the plugin, and then what I'm going to do is just select 2 frames, and it's going to add this link here. And then another thing, if we look at our current file as a whole, it is a bit messy. So what we can do is first, let's say we take our prototype flow frames, and we're just going to add a section. We'll just draw the section here. And you can call it something like flow. And then for all of our components here, first we can also reorganize them more nicely. But then again, you can just draw a section and call it something like components. So yeah, you get something like this. And I guess the last thing that I want to mention is that inside my community file, I did use this phone mockup for the cover of it. And just so you know, I did get it from another community file, this one here. And I'll link it in the description so you can use it as well. Aside from that, please let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye bye.